Hi, folks. Good to see you once again on another session. In this one, we are presenting another great topic brought to us by Nick Doyle, who has spent more than 30 years helping different organizations design their systems that are not just functional, but genuinely people-friendly and oriented. With deep expertise spanning business analysis, user experience, consulting, and organizational change, Nick is widely recognized as one of the leading voices in UX sphere, and he connects a lot of modern businesses with analytical practices. Nick is the author of User Experience Foundations, a book which I also read before, and the creator of the world's first user experience training course specifically designed for business analysts. He is also known for pioneering work on group construct analysis, exploring how stakeholders and worldviews and language and organizational culture shape decision making and change. Nick, it's my pleasure to be hosting this session, pleasure to be here today with you. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Yuri, and it's my pleasure to be here. Welcome, everyone. So we are here to talk about benefits realization. I don't know what benefits realization means to you. Possibly it's something that you haven't heard of at all. Possibly it's something that you've come across on projects that you do in your organization, but you're not directly involved with it. But to me, benefits realization is something very, very important on any project. It's really about making sure that the project succeeds. It's about making sure that the project delivers what it's supposed to deliver. So it's a funny word, benefits realization, because in English, the word to realize normally means to become aware of something or to understand something. But that's not what we mean when we say benefits realization. Normally, we're using the word in the sense that it's used in some other languages, like French, for example. If you say réaliser in French, it means to make something real. And that's what it is. It's about making benefits real. Um, but as we'll see as we go through, actually, it is also about understanding benefits, and it is also about becoming aware of benefits. So realization is quite a good word for it. Um, it's not rocket science, but there are some things that I think people often misunderstand about it. And when I was thinking about this talk, I realized that a lot of the problems with benefits realization are what you might call catch-22 problems. So I was thinking about the book Catch-22. I don't know if you've read this book. It was a big bestseller when it came out in 1961, and it's about an American serviceman who flies in bomber planes in the Second World War. And he's very keen to stop flying combat missions because he's worried that he's going to be killed. But the commanding officer that is in charge of his squadron keeps moving the goalposts. He keeps changing the number of combat missions that you have to fly on in order to be considered due for a leave of absence because you completed your tour of duty. So he thinks about declaring himself unfit on medical health grounds. The problem is that if you are sane enough to know that you've got a mental health problem, that means that you're sane enough to fly missions. So he never gets to do that. So the word catch-22 has kind of entered the English language as a way of referring to a situation where there's a problem. It ought to be possible to solve the problem, but um, the solution to the problem is somehow made impossible by the way that the problem operates. So I've come up with a list of six what I think of as catch-22s around benefits realization. So here's my um, my list. First of all, when a project fails, it's very often because the project has drifted away from what it was originally supposed to do. Um, People have lost sight of the business case for the project. Now, if you've got a business analyst, that shouldn't be a problem, because business analysts are supposed to be there to make sure that the project does not lose sight of the business case. That's one of the key functions of a business analyst, in my opinion. But what I've found talking to people about this from many different organizations is that in a lot of organizations, business analysts aren't actually involved in creating the business case. I've talked to several business analysts who told me in their organizations, they're not even allowed to see the business case for the projects that they're working on. Well, that's obviously completely mad. Um, so that's my first catch 22. Business analysts are prevented from doing their job. Um, the next one, the business case. The business case is an essential tool for ensuring successful projects. I would go so far as to say you can't really do a successful project if you don't have a business case. You're not going to know whether it's been successful or not, because that's what the business case tells you. Um, Another thing that's very helpful on projects, if you want your projects to succeed, is to take an iterative approach, an incremental approach. I don't need to tell you how useful that is on a lot of projects, and we often refer to that as agile. But when you do an agile project, there's a whole set of beliefs that come into play about what's the right way of doing a project. And one of them is that on an agile project, you don't have a business case. Of course, that's wrong. There's no law that says you shouldn't have a business case on an agile project, just like there's no law that says you shouldn't do documentation on an agile project, you shouldn't have a business analyst on an agile project, etc., etc. Um, but that is a common problem. So that's my next catch 22. Expectations about agile guarantee poor practice. The next one is in organizations, you normally need to get your budget approved for a project if it's a significant project. So there needs to be a business case document, and the project must promise to deliver quantifiable financial benefits. Um, it might be that the project does succeed in delivering a worthwhile solution, but people will judge it against the business case. So if it fails to actually deliver quantifiable financial benefits to the level that it said in the business case document, sometimes it's considered to be a failure for that reason. So that, of course, makes people less willing to commit themselves to predicting financial benefits in case they turn out to be wrong. Um, so over specifying benefits can damage your credibility. The next one, this really goes to the heart of benefits realization. If you want to get better as an organization, if you want to get better at doing projects, um, then you need to check the actual benefits that were delivered, the actual benefits that were realized at the end of the project, against what was planned at the beginning. So you need to check your actuals against your planned. And of course, that's just good practice anyway. Um, However, sometimes the benefits that are delivered as a result of a project, they only materialize months after the end of the development project, or even years after the end of the project. So the question is, who's going to measure those benefits? It's probably not going to be the business analyst, because normally the business analyst is part of the project team, and at the end of the project team will be dismantled, of course, and you'll be allocated to some other work. So you're not going to be there to do this benefits realization work. And this is the probably the most common problem that I see with people in organizations who would like to implement benefits realization, but they can't because It's the business analysts who understand that it's necessary to do it, but the business analysts aren't there anymore. So the project team is unable to measure the benefits realized. And that's a result of the fact that a project is by definition a sort of time limited time box, if you like. There's another consequence of that. Um, Benefits are not achieved by implementing technology. You don't get benefits from implementing technology. It might be a surprising thing to hear for some people, but you get benefits from doing something differently. And it's very likely that the implementing the technology is what allows you to do something differently, but it's not what actually gives you the benefits. It's doing something differently that gives you the benefits in your business as usual world. What that means is if the project is going to succeed, uh, then as part of the project, you need to work out, well, what does need to be done differently, of course. But you need to do more than that. You need to ensure that it gets done. You need to ensure that the business as usual activities of the organization are going to change as a result of this project. But how can you do that? Because again, a project is a time box. Um, so by definition, the things that are part of business as usual are going to be going on after the end of the project. So in that sense, the project team, if you think of the project team as a temporary construct, um, the project team is powerless to deliver business change. Uh, and that's another big problem. Uh, it's really about project teams not being ambitious enough in their understanding of uh, what their role is on the project. So that's the first five, but the top one is this. The business case for a project is a vital tool for decision making. Um, it's a document that can let people um, see whether the project is on track, whether the project is going to cost more than it originally was supposed to, whether the project is going to deliver the benefits that it was supposed to. But in many organizations, creating the business case is just seen as a bureaucratic hurdle that you've got to get over. Um, and it's so painful doing it that people then tend to just say, thank God that's finished. And they put the business case away and they never look at that document again. Uh, that means that the business case document does not get updated. And that's more than a shame. I would say it's criminal, really, because by doing that, you're making sure that the business case can't really serve its proper function. It can only serve its proper function as a decision-making tool if it's kept up to date and if people still believe everything that it says in it. I think ultimately in organizations, people don't always believe what it says in the business case, even when they write it. But certainly they lose that belief in it over the course of the project as the situation changes very often. Um, so of course, that's a vicious circle. If people don't really take business case documents seriously, then they're not going to bother keeping them updated anyway. So that's my sort of catch-22 number one. The business case is not kept up to date. Um, there is a tool that you can use in benefits realization that can help you uh, create a business case that can be kept up to date and it will help to solve some of these problems. And that's a benefits map. A benefits map is sometimes referred to as a benefits dependency network, or BDN for short, but I prefer to call it a benefits map. Um, and it sets out in a visual way, it sets out these five different things: IT capabilities, enabling changes, business changes, benefits, and objectives. So I'm going to show you an example. This is a very simplified version of the benefits map for a project that I was involved in 13 years ago. It was actually with the UK's IIBA chapter, and we built a a web-based platform to support everything that the UK chapter of IIBA did. It was a bespoke software development because at that time um, the UK chapter did have a sort of website, but it was based on the functionality that was provided by IIBA at a global level, and at that time that wasn't very much. It didn't provide very much functionality. Of course, things have changed a lot since then. Um, so how do we do this? The benefits map. We start off on the right hand side of the page, and we say, okay, what's the objective? What's the objective of this project? Um, so I'm saying here is to become a preferred provider of knowledge sharing and networking opportunities for business analysts, particularly in the UK. Okay, so that's the objective. Now you might have multiple objectives, for sure, but in this example, we've just got one. Then the next thing to identify is what are the benefits? So, what exactly is a benefit? A benefit is something that you think is going to happen as a result of your project that's going to be valuable to one or more stakeholders. It's something that they're going to value, it's something they're going to think is good. So, it's a desirable outcome, and it's a change. So the examples that I've got here are not very, they're not financial. It's very hard to measure any of these financially. And that's quite interesting. That's quite typical of a lot of projects that I've been on. Um, Very often the value of the project comes from the whole thing. You need to look at to take a holistic view of the whole thing in order to understand where the value of it is. But benefits mapping is about breaking it down into individual items or trying to break it down into individual items. So for each benefit, we need to think, well, who is this for? So the first one here is a seamless webinar experience. So that's for the members, the chapter members. They're going to have a seamless experience when they book for a webinar and then they attend it. It's all done with very, very few clicks. They don't have to go onto any other websites or use any other tools. It's all right there in the website. Um, Access to recordings of webinars. So again, that's something valuable for the members. Uh, Online payments, is that a benefit? Well, arguably, it's a benefit for the members. Arguably, it's a benefit um, for the board of the chapter and the volunteers. Otherwise, it would be very difficult and painful to take payments from people. The ability to react to needs. So that means that's a benefit for the chapter board. They're able to spot a need that members have or business analysts have. They can introduce a new service to support that need, um, and they've got everything they need in order to deliver it using the web platform. Um, And then finally, it's possible for the volunteers, the chapter volunteers, to update all the different parts of the website. Then we can link those benefits together. So ability to react to needs, um, then it is dependent on online payments and it's dependent on being able to update all the parts of the website, and that all of those benefits contribute to the objective. Um, So what we're saying here really is this is what the project's for, and if you break it down into good things that are going to happen, these are the good things that are going to happen. Now, of course, as a business analyst, you can't do all this on yourself. It's all about working together with stakeholders, and this is a great visual tool for using in workshops. Then the next column is the business changes. So, like I was saying before, you only get benefits from business change, in other words, from doing things differently. So the things that the chapter volunteers would need to do differently for this all to work is they would need to work on curating a library of recordings. They would need to operate this independent platform rather than relying on someone else to do it. They would need to be committed to using a particular payments provider. They would need to commit a certain amount of time and have a specific business process for managing events information. And they would need to commit time to keeping information up to date and have a business process for that as well. So just like before, we can show the dependencies between the business changes and the benefits. It's a many to many relationship, as you can see there. Um, then the next column, carrying on working over to the left, is the enabling changes. So whereas the business changes are the ongoing things that people are going to be doing differently within the business, the enabling changes are one-off things that you need to do in the organization. So we can see some examples there, and those are potentially linked to each other, and they are potentially linked to the business changes as well. So, for example, you can't use the payments provider without integrating the payment provider with the website. You can't integrate the payments provider without choosing the payments provider, etc. And then finally, on the left-hand side, we've got IT capabilities. So there are certain technology capabilities that you need to have operational. Maybe you've already got them when you start the project. Maybe you need to develop them or acquire them as part of the project. Um, uh, but they're over there on the left, and that really emphasizes how IT is just a tool to help you make the business changes. That's all it's there for. It doesn't really, it's not it's not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. Um, so yeah, coming back to looking at those benefits in the second column from the right there, as I said, they're not really financial. Um, this is a hierarchy that we talk about on the training course that I do about benefits. A benefit doesn't have to be financially quantifiable. Um, it could be just something that's predictable, but it's not predictable in terms of money. You can only say we're going to increase the number of members, for example, so that if you can predict how by how much you will increase your membership, that's a predictable benefit. If you think you're definitely going to increase the number of members you've got, but you can't even you're not even confident of predicting a certain number, you can say, well, okay, that's a measurable benefit. We're not going to commit ourselves to a number. We're just going to say this project will improve our number of members. Or it might just be a purely observable benefit where you can't even measure it. You can just see when you've done the project, oh yes, we've got a nicer website. You can't even measure how that how would you quantify that? Having a nice website, you just know it's a nicer website, so it's observable. So that's quite helpful. Um, and most organizations don't have such a fine-grained benefits categorization system. They simply distinguish between tangible and intangible benefits, which causes an awful lot of problems. Um, so to summarize, how do we make this work? Firstly, benefits management is not separate from project management. It's not separate from business analysis. It's part of how you do your project. Secondly, the benefits map is the business case. You don't need to write a long document with lots and lots of words in it and nothing else. Use the benefits map as your business case. Um, you can't just rely on what's in a diagram. You do need some supporting documentation because each of those nodes and each of those arrows needs to be clearly and concisely documented. But each node and each dependency is not cast in stone, and you should never imagine that it is. What it is, it's a hypothesis. What you're saying is, on the basis of the information we've got available to us at the moment, this is what we think is going to happen. And that's a crucial difference, very important. Um, The next thing is benefits. That list of benefits that we had there on the second column from the right, they're not objective facts. It's up to you and up to the stakeholders to decide what do we want to aim for in this project? And for each benefit, how are we going to measure it? Are we going to attempt to predict it, or are we not going to attempt to predict it? Are we going to try and measure it, or are we not even going to bother trying to measure it? As long as you've got some predictable financial benefits, enough to get the project approved, you don't need to over engineer it. So predictable benefits are good, but don't over specify them. Um, a, a few more just to finish up with. The benefits map is a living document. I hope that's come across. Every item needs to be thoroughly discussed and thoroughly understood, and it needs to be discussed and understood on an ongoing basis, not just before the project starts. So we constantly we want to be asking the question, is this right? Does this reflect reality? And this is hard. It's hard for you as a business analyst, but it's probably even harder for your stakeholders. That you can expect them to get tired. In a given workshop, you can expect them to get tired, and over the course of the project, you can expect them to get tired, and they will start saying to you, "Look, we've done this, we've talked about this." So you need to be prepared to say to them, "Yeah, I know we talked about it, but things may have changed. We need to revisit this." Um, and then finally, the owners of the business change. So that's the managers in the business as usual business units. They need to take ownership of the project, and they need to take ownership of the benefits realization process and the benefits realization review, because they're the people who can make the changes happen. They're the people that can make the changes stick, and they're the people that will still be around after the project team has been disbanded. So it needs to be their job to review the benefits, not the business analyst job. Although, of course, if they can get a business analyst involved, they're much more likely to make a good job of it. So quite a lot of stuff that we went through there. There's an awful lot more to say about benefits realization, but we've used up our time. So thank you very much for listening. And I'm going to stop sharing my slides now so that I can see if there are any questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Nick. It was very wonderful to hear your insights today. And yeah, it seems there are no questions at the moment.
Yeah, hi Fabrizio, hi Stefan. Good to see you here. Yeah, looks like you're endorsing the overall message, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, once again, then thank you a lot. I'm welcoming everyone to join our next session on this track that will be started in 2 minutes. So thank you again, Nick. Thank you everyone for joining, and see you pretty soon.